it's back. It's not as severe, so that's good. Okay, I debated over, I was trying to figure out how many people would be here tonight. When I decided not very many, and I was, of course, accurate with that supposition, that I would go to a passage that we use a lot, but there's a lot to it, and I haven't used everything that's in it yet. And that is Ephesians 4:11 through 16, which I think is the capsule summary. What's the church all about? Ephesians 4:11 through 16. And I want us to, we can throw 8 and 9 in there as an introduction to it. But I'd just like us to think about this and get a handle on what is up with this Christianity thing. How does it work? What should we do with it? So, are you ready? Larry's not ready. Yeah.
You want to answer a question?
Are you ready?
No, you want to answer a question? I have a question.
You have a question? Larry has a question. Ask away.
Okay, we've spent a lot of time talking about not being overly connected to a building.
And yet,
Okay,
understanding there are things we do here that are important.
if you would talk for just a minute about the difference between being added to the church, joining a church, and placing membership in a congregation.
As usual, you have to ask one of those kind of questions. But, okay, first of all, did everybody hear what he said? Okay. First of all, sometimes we give a definition to some of those things that you just mentioned that are not the only definitions possible. Okay, I'll give you an example of it in another area, and then we'll apply the principle to what you've asked. 1 Peter 3:21. The like figure, Noah, flood, water. The like figure, even baptism, does now save you. Okay? One could say, and be accurate in saying it, we'll even look at the laws of logic here just briefly because we can, that well, Jesus saves. Everybody knows that, and that would be right. That would be right in a more fundamental sense than baptism saves. Baptism saves as it relates to Jesus, because he goes on and he says, not the putting away the filth of the flesh, but the interrogation. It's a hard thing to translate in a way, and yet another way it's not. What it is talking about in the Greek is a thing like you do in the court, and you interrogate people. And so you're interrogating yourself to make sure that you're okay with God. And the answer you came up with in this interrogation scenario of 1 Peter 3:20 and 21 is that being baptized into Christ is something that I need to do so that I can be where I need to be with God. So as a result of that interrogation, baptism saves you. Jesus saves primarily, but secondarily, or in accessing Jesus, because if Jesus saved and there was nothing to do to access, then either everybody be saved or everybody be lost. We'd either have universalism or nothing. People say, what do we do? Oh, I don't know. So what you do to get in contact with something that is the primary course of salvation is also part of saving you. We'll say a little less saved, okay? And so here, I'll make one more thing, and then I'll go to your question. We've got windows here, which is nice because sometimes we don't, and it's hard to make this illustration without windows. Suppose we're here. Well, we are. And you're so excited about my preaching that you insist that I just keep going and going and going and going and going. In this scenario, the windows are closed. The blinds are drawn. And the power goes off. And you open up the blinds. You open up the blinds. Light comes in. Now, is opening the blinds the primary reason why we got light. No. There's a sun out there with light. So did we have to open the blinds to get the light? Yes. So did that bring us light? Yes, in the secondary sense, but not the primary sense, okay? Now, suppose you just won't let me stop. I'm like a Jimmy Stewart movie I saw last night. Mr. Deeds goes to town, and he's filibustering until he finally just collapses. So I'm doing that, and it's midnight. And the power's come on, and we've got the power goes off again. And Larry says, somebody open the blinds up. And y'all open the blinds up. It's midnight. Has anything happened? Okay, this shows why opening the blinds up doesn't primarily do anything. It secondarily does it if the thing is there to do. Okay, so, being added to the church, Acts 2:47. We've got an interesting translation thing here, an interesting Greek text thing here, so this will be really, really interesting. Acts 2:47. And the Lord was adding, if you've got a King James, the Lord was adding to what? The church. These people are getting saved, right? If you have something besides a King James, you will have something else there. It means the same thing, but it's voiced or translated in another way. Added to their number, okay? Which is probably the better reading of the manuscripts, but it's 6 of one, half a dozen another. Because who are these people? Well, they're the church, so their number is the church, right? Right. But the point there is that God, in the primary sense, that only He can do. I mean, if God's not going to put you in the church, it doesn't matter what you do. So in that sense, we are added to the church. Now, there is a secondary sense in which we affiliate with something where we decide to join it. Now, God's got to add me, but I could decide, I want to join up with those people. How do I do it? And you read in the scriptures what you need to do, and when you do that, God adds you to it. But that's kind of like a lot of other things. If you decide, I was a Kiwanis one time. And I decided I wanted to join the Kiwanis Club before I became one because it was doing a lot of good things in Bowling Green, and there were members of the congregation in it, and they gave free food for lunch, and I just thought, well, you know what? So I decided I was going to join the Kiwanis. Did I just go in there and sit down? They gave me a badge, and that was that? No. The Kiwanis organization had to add me to Kiwanis. But nobody would say, okay, the Kiwanis people added you. They did, but nobody would have had a dispute with me saying, I joined the Kiwanis Club. No, it's secondary. So, your question, are we added to the church? Yes, we are. The primary sense, we're added by God. Secondary sense, can we decide we want to affiliate with it? We want to join, if you will. Yeah, we can in the secondary sense, knowing that we have nothing to do with that ultimately. That's just something we do because we want to be part of that number, like the Kiwanis Club. We still got to have the Kiwanis do me. And the other one was place membership, right? That's a fun one, isn't it? Okay. Traditionally, I say traditionally, in churches of Christ, back in my early days as a child, and also I was a Methodist and an Episcopalian, okay? And one thing you would say that you did if you went from one Methodist church to the other is you would transfer your letter. Anybody ever heard of that? It actually got a good biblical basis, 2 Corinthians 3. Paul's talking about that if you were traveling around and you went to a particular congregation, you would have a letter from somebody telling you, okay, he's a good guy, which is a practically good practice. But he said to the Corinthian church, he said, you are my letter. You're not written out like normal. You're written on hearts. So there was another, he was drawing from that principle. But so what we're really talking about when we're talking about oftentimes placing membership is transferring our letter, even though we don't have a letter. Although sometimes I know people come with a letter because they want folks to know, this is a good guy, did a lot of good work here. Here's the eldership saying yes to these people. So I'm going to give you the Edwin Jones. Well, you did ask me, didn't you? I'm going to give you the Edwin Jones. If you're a Christian and you habituate the pews of a particular building, you are a member of that congregation. Now, that said, we traditionally have people who place membership. I want to be affiliated with this group. And sometimes we'll talk to people. You talk to people. They say, I'm looking, right? And maybe they never come back. And maybe they come back and say, we've looked. And you're where we want to be, right here. So we want to place our congregational membership, not our church universal membership. That's already been settled. We want to place our practical membership under this eldership. We want you to know that we consider ourselves part of y'all, and we're here to help any way we can. Okay? Do you have any rejoinders to that? Are you good with that?
You talked about a person entering that body of water, becoming a member of this congregation.
Well, in a sense, they do, but in a bigger sense, they become a member of the church.
Okay. I was thinking we have youth rallies.
We do have youth rallies everywhere.
Frequently, our children are baptized at a function like that.
Not one of my favorite things, but yes.
But they don't become a member of that congregation.
No, because she's at a camp or something, or maybe they go to Carnes for the whatever they do over there all the time, and they get baptized over there in the course of the week, and that. So no, they don't. That doesn't mean of itself that you are becoming part of that congregation there. It means you're becoming part of the church that Jesus built, and that under most circumstances, likely, other than what you've mentioned, a few other things, that will be the place where you are. You could be a child of a member, somebody's been visiting, decided to do it, whatever, and just assume you do. And so there's that.
So where do you place our importance of being part of a group
Okay.
like Lenore City?
Which takes us to our, this is completely unrehearsed, is it not? It takes us to Ephesians 4, 11 through 16. Look at verse 16 of Ephesians 4. This cannot be the church universal because it's too far flung. Everybody that is a Christian in the world is not working together like this. They cannot. So how can that which every joint supplies the proper working of each individual part, expanded in Romans 12 with the body, that everybody's a member of the body? You got hands, you got eyes, you got toes, you got feet. Everybody's a member of the body, and it takes us all together, and there are no insignificant portions. So the church universal is envisioned on the practical level of working as congregations individually, where you and you and you and me are pooling ourselves together to form, one of my favorite words, a synergy. The sum is greater than the individual parts added up. And here's something that I think we don't do well, because that's part of how the church is identified. That which every joint supplies, proper working of each individual part. It has to be talking about a local congregation. That's the only way it could practically work. But it does mean that everybody is supposed to be connected to the overall work of the church.
We saw that synergy Sunday afternoon.
Yes, we did. Let's talk about that, shall we? Sunday afternoon. Who was here Sunday afternoon for the filling of the bags? We filled 510 bags. That's what I'm talking about. And every employee of the Lenore City school system, janitors, teachers, administrative staff, every one of them got a bag from us saying, we appreciate what you're doing. And we've gotten a fair bit of things coming back. Thank y'all for doing that. That was very nice of you. And we are nice. So, but we go into that room, and people are asking me questions, because preachers are supposed to know stuff, right? Even though we don't. And they, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? When are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? When are we going to do this? And so, you know what I skillfully do? I said, ask Israel. Well, here was the plan. Here's what happened. Because if we'd planned it like, we do this, 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 you know what happens to things like that, don't you? They don't happen. In that room, at a certain point, your wife called everybody to order. Took a while to get the message, but they did. And she said, and we got 4 lines. We've got stuff dumped out down the lines. We got bags at the end with a little card to put in there telling them it's from us, okay? And basically, she says, Start up at the front, work to the back, put stuff in the bag. Who's ever at the back? I was one of the back people. Check to make sure you get a card in there and it's got all the stuff that's in there. And, we figured that out. We're adults. We buy houses and cars and groceries and work in the yard, and we can do stuff. So we didn't need to be micromanaged. We just need to be turned loose with what do we do? And everybody just started doing it. Boom, 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 boom. And it was done, wasn't it? Impressive. I think we need to do more stuff like that. Assume that people have good sense. And we don't try to say, now, wait a minute. You should have done that, should have that. No, if you're going to wind up over there, I don't care how you get there. I really don't. As long as it's not illegal, of course. So that's what I think that kind of thing looks like.
Who got the most benefit?
Who got the most benefit from Sunday? I think we did. And I've heard that from many people. We worked together, that which every joint supply. We had, guess what? We ran out of cookies. And you know what? Somebody has this unusually brilliant idea. I don't know how they came up with it. Stores have cookies. And they do. So me and my wife go to a store and purchase cookies and bring them back. And they have the bags that don't have cookies in them. Well, you know what they do with the cookies? They put them in the bags that don't have cookies.
Well, we spend so much time.
Wait a minute. We need to hear this. You're from Michigan, right? You got stuff to say.
So we spend so much time, it seems, worried about what we do,
Like,
in
what
the
happens
building.
if we run out of cookies?
In worship, we worry so much about X, Y, and Z and everything being exactly how we think it's supposed to be. But if you look at what we did Sunday, to me, that is the work of the church. Mm-hmm. That is what we should be doing, is going out.
We're sensible human beings. We can figure out
Yeah.
how to do it. We kind of figured out among ourselves.
Right,
we
we
do
take
it.
care of the community around us.
And
We
guess
show them
what?
the care. That's
Monday, you know what happened? Because we said, come by and pick up your bags Monday and take them to the schools. And we got people to each of the schools. How many were there? 10? 5? 6? 6. It's close. Tables were labeled. Somebody very cleverly, since there were 6 schools and there were different numbers for each school, put a label on a table. This goes there. You know what people did? They came in, put them in their cars, and took them to those schools. Isn't that amazing? We didn't give them maps or anything, They just did it.
Would you consider it a practical example of worship?
Would I consider it a practical example of worship? Yes, I would, in a sense. Okay, you keep doing this. Stop him. You have some control over him, don't you? Okay. Let's go to the Old Testament. All priests are Levites, but not all Levites are priests. Okay? All work is service, including worship, but not all service is worship. Make a distinction there. It's not one I'm going to go to the mat with, but there are certain things, like Abraham's going to take Isaac to sacrifice him, right? Okay. And he's got his fellows with him, and he's got the trusting Isaac. And he says to his people, which plugs right into Hebrews 11. He says, the lad and I are going yonder to that mountain and we're going to worship, and we are coming back. Well, he's going to sacrifice him. What? Okay, we go to Hebrews 11. What do we find out? That his faith is so great. He's been a work in progress, has he not? He's stumbled, has he not? He's had some, less than stellar moments, like with his wife Sarah, a couple of times, pawning her off as his sister. The second time knowing that she's part of the promise too. But anyway, he's like the rest of us. So when God says, I want you to, it's a great Bob Dylan song with this in there, by the way, if you're a Dylan fan. He says, we're going to come back. You look at the Hebrews, right? He says, he believed. His faith has grown so much there, by faith. He believed so strongly that God was a promise keeper. He'd seen it demonstrated to him time after time after time, that he reasoned this: if God said that child is going to be the child of promise, if I kill him, God will raise him back up. So he's going to come back with the child, even though he's going thinking he's going to kill him. God stays his hand, or has his hand stayed, and he doesn't. We're going to worship. So was he serving, getting the trip organized in the wood, everything and the servants, and yeah, he's serving God. Is that particularly worship in the truest of senses? Not really. But it is service. And service is not a lesser category of work than worship. Everything's service. One more. He's got one more. Keep going. We'll be out of time soon. I won't have to do anything.
If our expressing appreciation
Uh-huh.
to others demonstrates our love for God and brings greater benefit to us
The doers.
we appreciate it, why can't we do more of that? Won't that bring us closer together?
Yes, it will. I used Carnes as an illustration, and I wasn't doing this to say anything nasty about him recently. It was all about, because that's how life goes recently. People build buildings, they contract people, they give them money, they do it. When Carnes, through the working of Brother Duncan, kind of tricked somebody into selling land because nobody wanted to sell land to the congregation because they thought we were a bunch of, pardon the expression, holy rollers. And he said, I tell you what, you will never regret selling this land. It will be good for this community. I promise you that on my word. And he was trusted enough to where he sold the land. He built one of those Nasty Church of Christ buildings, and people said, oh yeah, those are good people. They're doing good work. So the first building and the first addition was largely indigenous labor. I get there, this is, I think it's 1953 that this happens, I think, 51 or 53. Sarah and I get there in 1986, fresh from New Zealand. We'd heard so much about Carnes, we thought this can't be it. It must be the church down the road, which is the big Baptist church, because it was really ratty looking. But I heard people talk about friendships that they forged and good times they had putting that first building and addition together. We thought about trying to recreate that when we were doing steel and all this, you know, and decided that we'd be in the contractor's way and we would violate laws, and if it fell in, then we'd have to, you know, pay large amounts of money and all of that. But that was an example of people coming together. When we built the library, the Bill Nix Library, who had never done it before, hung sheetrock. Even preachers can be taught things like that. And I enjoyed it. I felt my dad was a mechanic, my brother was a mechanic, and they were hands people. My dad was a big reader, but he's mainly a hands people. It was fun for me to be a hands person for a while, you know? Rex Turner at the school that I went to when I became a Christian and decided to preach, he said, I'd like to just go out someday and just chop wood. I miss stuff like that. I'm tired of administrative stuff. Real stuff with real people doing real things that you can see the benefit of. So yes, I think we should find ways to do that. And pretty much all you have to do is say, here's what we're going to do it. And people got sense enough to do it, don't they? They did. I mean, it's amazing, wasn't it? Who was amazed? I was amazed. He's not been here long enough. You trust yourself. You're a musician. You're not a ball player. We worked together harmoniously at the School of Preaching years ago.
We did, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Okay. So, since I had the benefit of just sitting here listening to you and letting my thoughts wander a little while you spoke, I had it's kind of like the TV running in the background. Like I hear what's going on, but then I start looking. So, to go with about 3 of, I'm going to call you Leon now because you called me
Leon?
David. You called me David, so I'm going to call you Leon.
He's good with that.
Okay. With Brother Larry, I think about Hebrews 10, and verse 25 is the one that's the assembly verse.
There's a 24.
But it's the second half of a statement. The first half of which says, "And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works.
And we did some stirring up in there.
So that's one thing. To go back to the question of why, the importance of getting together and being with other Christians, even in that one verse there in verse 24, the term one to another is a single word in Greek, which I actually went and looked at my notes a minute
all
ago.
over the place in the New
It's
Testament.
47 times,
That's
to
a
be
lot.
specific. But it appears over and over and over again, and the term itself demands a mutual thing. It's not something you do to somebody. It's something you do to them.
Speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, as an example.
You do to them, and they do to you. So obviously, this is not talking about something that's done to the world. This is something that's done among Christians.
And if we can't find a back and forth, it doesn't work.
So if you don't have a group of those people, like you said, to do the back and forth, then there's 47 things right there. 47 verses that it's really hard
Just
to
get rid of those. We can't do those.
yeah, I mean, and if you look down the list of those things too, they are the things that are major identifying marks of the church. Love, confess your sins to one another that you may be healed.
That's what people notice out there, isn't it?
And at all of these one to another statements that show up over and over and over again, it's really hard to do
One another.
what the Bible says without being around other Christians. And so
Thank you.
that's
Thank
all
you.
that I have. Thank you.
Which brings me to one of my favorite sarcastic things to say. If we would just put a sign out there, we don't use instruments when we sing, we better be putting out chairs, because people will be coming in here filling us up and say, why didn't you tell us that? We'd have been here a long time ago. No, they wouldn't. Well, wait a minute. We partake the Lord's Supper every first day of the week. Oh, man, I'm looking for a place like that. Come on. No. What do they notice? What did Jesus say? By this will all men know that you are my disciples. He's given them a new commandment. John 13, 34, and 35. If you love one another as I have loved you, by this all men will know that you're my disciples. They will not know we're their disciples because we don't use an instrument in here, because they don't know what we do in here. But love radiates out. So, one another, huge concept in the New Testament, requires reciprocation.
I can give you a few real quick because I have the note
Wait, why
pulled
don't
up.
you do that?
For example, in regards to unity, and this is not even a complete list, but Romans 12:16, be of the same mind to one another. Romans 15:7, receive or accept one another. Galatians 5:15, don't bite and devour one another. Ephesians 4:2, bear with one another. Ephesians 4:32, be kind and forgiving one to another. James 5:16, confess your sins one to another. And then love one another in places like John 13:34, and love one another fervently. And we go on, I'm looking down the list a little further. Give preference to one another, Romans 12:10. Serve one another.